staying with us now, is in the papers this morning that hikes to the electricity levy will prevent cuts to energy bills. Plus, mortgage holders could see their rates rise by as much as 3.5% later this year. All good news. We're full of good news this morning.
It's wonderful, isn't it? I like to bring the joy. Anyway, here to tell us more and offer some advice is Daragh Cassidy, consumer expert from bonkers.ie.
Good morning,
What in the name of God is happening with the electricity again? I thought we were coming down the end of this awful series of price hikes.
Yeah, I know one crisis ends and it's like another begins. So it's not great news, unfortunately, for electricity customers, because it looks as if grid fees are going to go up by over €100 a year. Now, grid fees is the cost for the transport of electricity into people's homes. So when we think of electricity bills, we usually think of the cost of the oil, the gas, maybe the wind. But what people at home probably don't realise is that there's a big cost for actually transporting the electricity, the pylons, the wires into people's homes. And EirGrid, which manages the grid, has basically said, we need more money to manage that grid. Give us more money. The CRU, the energy regulator, has said, yes, here you go. And it's basically going to add around €100 a year to people's bills.
So this is on top. We thought we were going to see another decrease in bills before the end of the summer. Is that likely?
We could still see a decrease, but the decrease is probably going to be less than we would have seen, because even though people, when they get their bill, you won't see grid fees. So if you're being charged 30 cents per kilowatt hour for your electricity, you won't see, grid fees on that. But around 10 cents of that 30 cents actually goes towards the upkeep of the grid. So around a third. So it's quite a big percentage. And what I fear now is that what might happen is that prices might still go down because wholesale prices are falling, maybe over the coming weeks, but whereas they might have gone down by 2 or 3 cents per kilowatt hour, the energy suppliers now will say, well, hang on a second, because we have these grid fees going up, we're going to only reduce prices by maybe 1 cent per kilowatt hour, if that makes sense. So we could still see some small price decreases in the second half of the year. Well, we are now in the second half of the year, but I think this is going to limit them a huge amount, unfortunately.
And of course, there's kite flying as well ahead of the budget, and there's talks of another €150 electricity credit for most households as well, so that might offset that in some way, shape,
a little
form.
bit, but the other problem as well is that the PSO levy has gone up, so that's gone up to over €42 a year from zero, and that might go up from 9% to 13.5%.
What's the PSO levy?
The PSO levy is a levy to help with the generation of renewable electricity. So it's to support wind farms and solar farms.
So they give it, they take it away.
They kind of do.
They kind of do. Was this needed at the moment? Did the regulator have to say yes to this? Could they put that down the line a little and just to give us a little breathing space?
I suppose they could, but then, we could have tried to turn on the lights in December and they wouldn't have come on.
I don't think that was going to happen.
But look, unfortunately, this probably isn't the end of it. We have a rapidly growing population. The move towards net zero isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be free. A lot of people think that there's loads of really cheap green electricity on the way.
There's no such thing.
It's not. No, you're right, there's not. And the grid needs a huge amount of investment to cope with all of this renewable electricity that we're hoping to produce. So unfortunately, we'll probably be here this time next year discussing grid fees going up by another €100.
OK, let's talk about mortgages.
This is more great news.
But I was astonished by this. Like, first-time buyers' mortgage approvals top $1 billion in July.
Yeah, so there is a little bit of good news. So obviously, when we're talking about the mortgage market and the housing market, it's usually never good news, particularly, I think, with the rental markets where things are really, really tough.
Grim.
But grim is one word to describe it. But the figures from the BPFI today, the Banking and Payments Federation of Ireland, they do show that there are actually people out there who are getting mortgage approval and who are finding their homes. And basically, the number of approvals for mortgages reached a record high of over 5,000 in July. For first-time buyers, it was around 3,300. Now, all those approvals don't turn into drawdowns, in fairness.
That's what I was saying, because actually I only was talking to somebody yesterday, approved, looking for some place for 6 months, there's nowhere to buy. So it's all delightful getting mortgage approval.
And then you have to reapply again because it goes out of date.
It usually goes out of date after 6 months, although AIB has just extended that to 12 months. But you're right, all of these approvals don't, unfortunately, turn into drawdowns because people are still finding it difficult to get a home. But it does show that people are obviously earning enough, the economy is doing well enough that all of the banks are happy to give people, to give people mortgages. So this goes to show that it's not maybe all bad news, but look, I'll be the first person to say. It's still very, very tough if you're young and trying to get on the property ladder.
And something that you sort of say, sorry, Elaine, something that you always bang on about on this show, and we see that people are doing it, they're switching around.
Yes.
Because they're seeing, and this thing with non-bank lenders, that if you got a loan from a non-bank, that could really increase by the end of the year.
Yeah, so the non-bank lender customers are really going to be hit quite hard, although it could be the same with other customers as well, because basically up until maybe 2 years ago, you could have gotten an interest rate, a mortgage rate of maybe 1.9%, so it was quite low.
Very low.
Now, it did come with some caveats, but obviously mortgage rates have increased a huge amount over the past 2 to 2.5 years. Now, they are beginning to kind of go down again, but they were here, they went up to here, they're kind of here. But what we're seeing is that a lot of the people that took out low rates of maybe 2% or even under 2, 3, 4 years ago, those fixed rates are now coming to an end. And when people are looking to refix, they're finding out that rates are much, much higher than they would have expected.
So these are people that actually, their mortgages weren't sold to a non-bank entity by anybody under distress. These are people who actually applied and took out these mortgages on very low rates to begin with.
Yes, exactly, yes. And they're finding out now that, oh my God, rates have actually gone up. Now, the lowest rate in the market today is 3.45%. So if anybody is listening or watching and,
For these people who had a non-bank loan, can they switch?
So with the non-bank lenders, it's even worse, unfortunately, because their rates are much higher. So, for example, some of the non-bank lenders are Finance Ireland and ICS mortgages, OK? Up until maybe 2, 3 years ago, you could get a rate of maybe 2.2, 2.3% with those lenders. The cheapest rate now with them is around 6 or 7%.
Oh, holy God.
So those customers in particular could be in for a huge shock. Now, they can, of course, look at switching, which I'd advise them to do, compare the market. You don't need to accept that rate. But they're in for a huge shock. But even if you're with, let's say, Bank of Ireland or PTSB, the same thing applies.
Look around, as you say, always look around. Daragh Cassidy from bonkers.ie, thank you very much.